Ya Allah, Subhanallah, Ya Allah, Alhamdulillah, Ya Allah, La ilaha, Allahu Akbar, Ya Allah, Subhanallah, Ya Allah, Alhamdulillah, Ya Allah, La ilaha, Allahu Akbar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. You're welcome to another edition of Today's Woman, the African Pride. With me in the studio, the Wahab Adams studio, is an officer of the Public Service Commission and an entrepreneur. She goes by the name Mrs. Zakia Mohammed Sali. Thank you for joining us once again. This is a familiar face. If you don't know her, then it means you haven't been faithful to Today's Woman. So keep watching and you keep seeing this face. Let's get to our topic of today. So we all know how crucial parenting is in the life of a child. But talk of the child that is motherless and fatherless. So who cares for that child? Who protects that child? And who speaks for that child? So in respect to that, we're going to be talking about protecting our orphans. If you're very familiar with the scriptures of Islam and what it has to say about orphans, you know that this is a very important, topic to throw so much light on, and we need to be very educated on that. So, Mrs. Zakia, it's so nice to have you on the show again on our new season. So let's go. Who is or who are orphans and where do they come from?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's a very interesting question, especially the second part of it, which seeks to know where they come from. Because usually there's this perception that out of nowhere, orphans come out of nowhere.
Right.
But then in actual fact, we forget that within any split of a second, any one of our children could be orphaned.
That's correct.
We tend to forget that fact, but then it is a fact.
Right.
They do not come from anywhere. It is circumstances that makes them orphans.
Right.
For instance, we've had wars which have rendered a lot of kids orphans.
That's correct.
There are natural disasters. We've had floods, we've had earthquakes, and what have you. We've even had viruses and diseases. And in recent times, we've had the novel coronavirus, which has rendered a lot of children orphans. I mean, no one would ever want his or her child to become an orphan, but then it is the reality. And so in answering your question as to who an orphan is, an orphan is a child or children or a group of children who by virtue of losing their parents, they have no one to care for them. They become fatherless or motherless. That is in the real sense of its meaning. That is according to how we understand who an orphan is in general terms. But then in Islam, we are told that an orphan is someone who has lost either one or two of the parents. And it's usually the father. If a child or children loses the father, then they are termed as orphans. If the child loses the mother and the father is still alive, then the child is not, the child doesn't have the status of an orphan. So Islam stresses on the demise of the father. Once the father passes away, the child becomes an orphan. And that is why Islam stresses the importance of taking care of children who have lost fathers, but their mothers are still alive. Islam encourages us to take care of such group of people. And then one critical point that we need to understand in the definition of orphans is the fact that once the child reaches the stage of maturity, then he or she ceases to become an orphan. So from, let's say, infancy up to the age of about 18, which is the age of adulthood, or when the child reaches, or when it is perceived that the child can make meaningful sense out of his or her life, then at that point, that child ceases to become an orphan. So basically, orphans are just people or children who are left with no protection at all because of the loss of a father or both the father and the mother.
Being an orphan is a devastating thing, even for adults. But I appreciate the fact that you threw light on the fact that if somebody becomes an adult, the person isn't necessarily, categorized as an orphan, because the person can most likely fend for themselves. So it's the focus is on a child, an underaged person that does not have these key people in their lives. So moving to my next question. Which systems exist in our African societies, help orphans? And let's discuss the extended, family system. What's the whole dynamic? How does it work for, in the traditional system? That we'll get to the Islamic part, but then in our traditional system, how are orphans catered for? Are they looked out for?
In a typical traditional extended family system,
right,
where it includes members of the families, right, members of your father's family and members of your mother's family, paternal and maternal families. We have our uncles, our aunties, our cousins, and then when you go into a typical town or village anywhere in Africa, you would find that these extended families live in compound houses.
Right.
So you'd have your father, your mother. If the father has more than one wife, you're all living in the same compound.
Right.
The children grow up together,
right,
and there is no specific. You cannot pinpoint a specific adult in that community who associates with any one of the child, because the children are considered as children of the whole family system.
Right.
Each parent looks out for the other party's children.
Right.
And it's very typical that you would go into an extended family and find children eating together in one bowl.
That's correct.
You find the children, the underage children, you find the adult men, adult female, and the younger female and adult, everyone, it's like a communal living sort of thing.
Right.
Everyone looks out for each other.
Right.
So when it comes to the extended family system, the critical basic needs that the child, seeks at that point, the extended family system stands to provide those needs.
Right.
And these critical needs are, for instance, food, because you're all eating together. Food,
right,
clothing,
right,
shelter.
Right.
It's a family house. Everyone lives in it.
Right.
So the extended family system provides the critical, needs that the child, seeks at that age.
Yeah.
It
as
is
well as belongingness, which is very important.
Yes.
Right.
The feeling of belonging, the feeling of being valued by other people. That's and correct. Even by yourself.
Yeah, and identified.
Yes, yes, you are identified with a certain group of people.
Right.
So these are all needs that the extended family provides the orphans, if there are any.
Right.
And I think it's a very good thing. Yes.
Yeah, that's very impressive. For those of you who are watching and you're not familiar with the African culture, basically, once you're a child, you have many parents. You're not limited to just one parent. So if you're in a situation where you have lost your father or you've lost both parents, you automatically, have people to cater for you. Despite the traditional, extended family system, several studies have shown that orphans in sub-Saharan Africa are particularly vulnerable to abuse and neglect. This is quite, opposite to what we have.
Contradictory.
How does this work?
Right. Ideally, just as we mentioned, the extended family system should be a protector. It should be the unit that protects the vulnerable orphan.
Right.
But then, just as you mentioned, in sub-Saharan African countries, and even when you read a report that was done by UNICEF, I think that was in 2010,
right,
it states that over 56 million, it estimates over 56 million orphan children in sub-Saharan Africa. And given the fact that over the years there has been wars, there has been natural disasters, and what have you, you can imagine the number of children who up till then have become orphans.
Yeah.
So it's a really big issue. But then the issue is, when you come to sub-Saharan Africa, poverty exists. Poverty levels are very, very high.
Right.
And so resources are very scarce to to come by.
Right.
You know, most families in sub-Saharan Africa earn very low incomes. The income levels are very low. So you can imagine a family who is managing with very low income levels, and then having to take on the responsibility of another dependent, or in some cases dependents when they are more than one, into the family. So you can imagine that this sort of thing is going to overstretch the family's income. You know, because already they have issues of paying school fees and catering for their own children. But then this is the case whereby other children, probably the brother's children or a friend's children, are coming under his or her care. And so in this case, it becomes difficult sometimes for the fathers or the heads of the families to accept these children and to actually protect and provide them with the care that they need. So poverty is an issue here. They would rather prefer to, first of all, take care of their children before the orphans who came to join the families. Apart from that too, sometimes we have orphans living with non-biological parents. And when this is the case, and especially when these parents have their own biological children, these children become susceptible to discrimination. Because just as I mentioned earlier, I would provide for my child first before you. And because of the overstretched income and all of that, what we discussed earlier on, it becomes an issue. They become vulnerable and they become discriminated upon and sometimes maltreated. So living with non-biological caregivers, especially maybe step-parents, is one of the issues that leads to these orphans being maltreated. Apart from that, there is also stigma. You know, already families and communities that the child live in, there's already this stigma of having the status of an orphan. So they become vulnerable to bad people. Somebody is looking for children to do drugs. Oh, I know this orphan girl in this corner who has no one to take care of her. So these are the sort of children that they prey on. And because probably those people are providing them with the attention, with the love, and these people are supplying them with the things that they need to survive and what have you, they become easily, you know, lured into bad things, and sometimes they end up being prostitutes, armed robbers, and what have you. Yeah. So and then also. Yes, just as I mentioned, stigma and then living with non-biological parents. Because of time, I think I would limit it to these four, and then maybe we can go on to the next question.
Okay. So in what you just spoke about, you made mention of maltreatment method to orphans. Let's look into, it's a particularly sad topic. Let's look into some of the unfortunate treatments that orphans, go through, because I'd like to believe that they do not go through these maltreatments only from their, whoever they become dependent on, but the society in as a whole, they become just the second-hand citizens of society. So, what are some of these maltreatments they're exposed to?
Okay, as I mentioned earlier. Intra-household discrimination is one of the ways in which they are being mistreated. And in this case, we spoke earlier on about the child coming to live with non-biological parents and the fact that they already have their own children. So in this case, and in the case whereby the biological children, sometimes they become jealous of the adopted child, probably because they feel he's a dependent and as such does not deserve certain things that the parents are doing for them. And so sometimes they are meted out with discrimination, and then they are probably sometimes just, making them feel as if they are not wanted in the family. So even when it comes to schooling, the biological children might have the chance to go to school, whilst the adoptive child, because of constraints or because they feel that child doesn't deserve to go to school, would rather make the child stay at home and then get involved in excess house chores. And even in some cases, food is discriminated upon, because the orphan child is being fed with low quality food, whilst the biological children or the other family members are fed with.
It's in some cases the orphans would have to earn their meal according to the amount of chores they
yes,
perform.
yes,
So
wage labor. They are engaged in wage labor and all of that. And then also, just as I mentioned, excess house chores. Sometimes the orphans are just made to do excess house chores, and in some cases they do almost all the chores in the house. Apart from that, to exploitation by family members when it comes to their properties, probably because they do not have anyone to fight for them or to cater for them. Their properties are being taken from them. It could be in the form of lands, it could be in items that are in the orphan child's home, or any other form of property that has been left for the child. And then also, they are also meted out with emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, you name all the abuses. And mostly when it comes to the psychological abuse, it has to do with, it's in connection with the loss of their parents. For example, a stepmom can tell you, am I the one who killed your mother or your father? These are some things that we hear from such homes most often, and it makes the child feel that they are not being valued. Psychologically, the child begins to internalize this and feels that they are a nobody. Their self-esteem drops, and in the end, they might become wayward, or they fall on people who prey on them. For instance, like elderly men who would lure them with their monies because these men are providing for them. Yeah. So
that's very interesting. This last point you raised about their self-esteem, being, their self-esteem plummeting, because to add, salt to injury, they're already, for what I can imagine, you never, when it comes to your children, losing a child or losing a parent, you never stop mourning your that kind of loss. So you'd wake up and you're upset that you're not living with your father, or it's your father that is caring for you, and then
that
you'd have
alone
to
is upsetting enough,
right? And then you'd have to be subjected to people throwing it in your face and reminding you every day that you are in this position. So it must be such a tough position to be in. So which leads to this next question. I feel like it is, it's only right that it follows up, because we spoke about the maltreatment that they go through. So why is there the need? Obviously there is a need, right? But then let's talk about the need to protect and the consequences of neglecting, and ways. Let's also throw light on ways of protecting. This is a packed question.
Okay, yeah, it's a really packed question, and there's the need to protect them, because just as I said earlier on, these children. Because let me give an example. Just imagine a baby when it cries for the comfort of its mom. It cries a lot, and then once the mom picks it up, it ceases crying because of the warmth and comfort that the mother is providing to it. So just imagine that there is no one there at that point to comfort the child. It's really, it would be really devastating to the child. And so it behoves on us, especially those of us who have the means to take care of these children, to take care of them, because Allah has given us the means to do so. At that point, they don't have anyone in this society to protect them. It is our responsibility. They are our responsibility. If we don't take care of them, who would? and they also have the right to be taken care of, because that is why we are there. And I mean, we as Muslims, those of us who have the means to be able to protect these children.
Right.
It is very important, because if we don't do that, then we would have to bear the consequences. If we don't provide them with the critical needs, basic needs that these children need, we would have to bear the consequences. It is these same children who would become armed robbers, robbing our homes. They'll become prostitutes, spreading diseases around. They'll be lured into, terrorist groups and all forms of vices. It is these same children who would go into these vices and then take away from us. So instead of protecting them and then helping them, harnessing them, and then giving them the ability to thrive, not just to survive, but giving them the ability to be able to thrive in this world.
Right.
If we don't do that, then they are going to take back from us instead of giving. So it is very important, and Islam places a very critical importance in the upbringing of children, because Islam says that there is blessing in this. Apart from the fact that we as a community would benefit from these children, Allah would also bless us manifold.
Right. I like how you're able to flip it and let people know that you are to bear the consequences, aside being it's being humane, and just morally right to be able to support, an orphan. And you mustn't do it directly, or you mustn't, take up the whole responsibility, but you can support a family that has taken up, that responsibility, because they have more mouths to feed. On the part of, them becoming likely to become delinquents in the society, there is that. And I'd like to, throw light on the fact that if you do not help them nurture, you do not help instill proper values into them, they probably won't be delinquent. They'll become, very prominent people in society, but with very bad characters. And they could be our CEOs. They could be people that would employ your children one day. They could be people that would marry your children one day. Or, they just be part of the society. So you want that, children grow up, in a very proper way with proper psychological, skewing into the right direction.
Exactly. And I would like to give an example, because, you remember earlier on I mentioned that every child, or any child at all who is conceived, needs certain basic, critical needs, which includes food, shelter, clothing, and what have you. Right. And then once these needs are provided, then the child acquires a learned, a learned behavior.
Right.
Because those needs have been provided. Right. And then the child grows on to seek the other needs, which are the values, the feeling of being loved, the feeling of being valued, having value for themselves, and being valued by other people. Right. So naturally, the child would seek these needs at a point in time. Right. And so when these needs are supplied, whether positively or negatively, it is going to be another learned behavior that the child acquires. So an example is if a starving child learns that it is only through stealing that he would be fed, because he's hungry. It becomes normal, natural to him. It becomes a learned behavior, because that is where he gets his food from. So in other words, if being a child soldier, or being in an armed robbery group, or being lured by men, is what the child receives or is being supplied with this kind of need, then definitely it becomes, as I said, a learned behavior. Right. So these children, whether positive or negative, wherever they are getting it from, that is what they become. So just as you said, if we don't provide them with this sort of protection, where the supply is coming from is what would make them who they are. And just as you said, they become the armed robbers, all the vices that you can name, instead of becoming the CEOs and the doctors and the nurses that we need to contribute to the betterment of our societies.
That's very true. And on the positive side, if you help, orphans, and they grow up and they become proper, citizens of society, they come back, and look out for other orphans, because it does.
Exactly.
Orphans won't stop as long as human beings are, are likely to pass on. There'll be the existence of orphans. So you realize that they come back. We see all the time. They come back to society and try and
becomes,
help, a cycle. So it becomes a positive, reenactment in society, and that is only beautiful. So people are encouraged to try as much as possible to contribute into an orphan's, life. And according to Islam, the reward is grand.
Very grand.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, what are your final words in line to Islam's solution in this matter?
Okay. You see, in Islam, it is the right of every child to be taken care of, whether physically, psychologically, emotionally, and these rights don't change even when they become orphans.
Right.
Yes, just as I said earlier on, they have the right to be taken care of by the communities in which they live in.
Right.
And so Islam places a critical importance in the care of orphans. And in several places in the Holy Quran, it particularly mentions orphans.
Right.
In numerous places in the Holy Quran, there are verses on how to take care of orphans from inception through to adulthood and even beyond. There are injunctions on how to keep their properties, not devouring their properties, and all of that. So there are very strict rules in Islam with regards to orphans, because remember that our Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, was also an orphan himself. So in many places in his sayings, he has mentioned about orphans, and in one of them he mentioned that he who passes his hand through the head of an orphan, like he who caresses his hands just purely for the sake of Allah, not for any other anybody's sake, then that person will be rewarded manifold. He has mentioned, and in several other places he has mentioned this, but I'm sure that we would discuss this in our next
because
episode.
It's a very important topic, and we'll have a second part where we delve into the Islamic perspective, to be exact. I've been speaking to Mrs. Zakia Mohammed Sali, an officer of the Public Service Commission and an entrepreneur. She doesn't like, her credentials and her big positions to be mentioned on air, but I'm always going to repeat them. We've been speaking about protecting our orphans, and I'd just like to throw light on the Holy Quran, which is Allah's word, that says, I'm sorry if I can't, give you the exact place, but it says that do not take, like, woe unto you if you take from an orphan. And I would like to, let you, the viewers, know that not giving is a part of taking, because every child requires, it is every child's right, like Sister Zakia rightfully said, to have certain basic needs. So you not contributing is almost as if you're taking, because the more you add, the better the person, becomes, because a child cannot have enough, an orphan cannot have enough, support. All the support is needed. So if you know an orphan in your community, you do not have to be related to this, child. You should do something, to help this child, be it monetary or in kind. This has been today's Woman, the African Pride. My name is Hiba Farouk. We've been speaking about protected orphans in society. If for those of you who are not satisfied with what we have spoken about, don't worry. We have another part where we'll be speaking specifically on the Islamic perspective of this topic. So stick around and look out for more episodes of Today's Woman. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
And there is no God beside him, the knower of the unseen and the seen. He is the gracious and the merciful God. Oh Allah, you are most great. He is Allah, and there is no God beside him, the knower of the unseen and the seen. He is the gracious and the merciful God. Oh Allah, you are most Allah,
you are holy.
oh Allah,
We praise you.
oh Allah,
There is no God,
you are most great.